These are the other snails in the flock who all stuck tight to the smooth black rock
Um,
and said to the snail with the itchy foot, "Be quiet, don't wriggle, sit still, stay put." But the tiny sea snail sighed and sniffed, then cried, "I've got it! I'll hitch a lift."
Mommy,
This is a trail of the tiny snail.
I go round and round, round and round and round and say to the snail,
A silvery trail that looped and curled and said, "Lift one tip around the world."
"Let's say the whale." That's it.
No, that's towards the end. See,
That's it.
but well done, though you remember. And this is the whale who came one night when the tide was high and the stars were bright. A humpback whale, immensely long, who sang to the snail a wonderful song of shimmering eyes and coral caves and shooting stars and enormous waves. And this is the tale of the humpback whale. He held it out to the starlit sea and said to the snail, "Come, sail with me." This is the sea, so wild and free, and that carried the whale and the snail on his tail to towering icebergs and far-off lands, with fiery mountains and golden sands. These are the waves that arched and crashed, that foamed and frolicked and sprayed and splashed the tiny snail on the tail of the whale. This,
He's not scared of the tiny whale.
no,
And he's very real scared at
the
the
whale
big
is
whale.
very, very huge.
And the tiny whale. And he's very sassy. And
Yes.
big waves might hit you here.
Maybe, maybe not. I think the whale and the snail, they're holding onto each other really, really tight. And if there's a big wave, the snail will hide inside the shell, so it doesn't get hurt at all. These are the caves beneath the waves, where stripy fish and feathery fins and sharks with hideous toothy grins swam around the whale and the snail on his tail. This is the sky, so vast and high, sometimes sunny and blue and warm, sometimes filled with a thunderstorm
And
with zigzag lightning.
was that the storm?
Yes, this is the storm, with zigzag lightning, flashing and frightening.
Was that a wind?
This is the tail of the whale when it's raining and snowing.
And windy too.
Oh, yes.
And that's not and windy.
The tiny snail
The baby
on the
said,
tail of the whale. And she gazed at the sky, the sea, the land, the waves and the caves, and the golden sand. She gazed and gazed, amazed by it all. And she said to the whale, "I feel so small." But then came the day the whale lost his way These are the speedboats running a race, zigging and zooming all over the place, upsetting the whale with their ears splitting roar, making him swim too close to the shore. And this is the tide slipping away. And this is the whale lying beached in a bay. Quick, off the sand, back to sea, cried the snail. I can't move on land, I'm too big, moaned the whale. The snail felt helpless and terribly small. Then, I've got it, she cried, and started to crawl. I must not fail, said the tiny snail. This is the bell from the school in the bay. This is the bell from the school in the bay, ringing the children in from their play. This is the teacher, holding her chalk, telling the class, sit straight, don't talk. And this is the board, as black as soot. And this is the snail, with an itchy foot. A snail, a snail! The teacher turns pale. Look, say the children, it's leaving a trail. This is the trail of the tiny snail. A silvery trail saying, saying,
said the whale.
why it's not opening?
Mommy.
Oh, save the whale, that's right. And these are the children running from school, fetching the firemen, digging a pool.
Mommy, what's that? That's a car. I think that's probably a fire truck car.
Yes,
And what's that? That excavator.
yes, that's still a fireman, but this one, they got a special tools on the back.
And it can dig the ground.
Mm.
And this is
This
a
is
fire
a
truck.
big fire truck. This one is a small one, just with a water hose in there.
No,
No, that's a digger.
that's a digger.
Yes,
I said that.
you're right.
This is digger to dig the pool.
Yeah, to dig around the whale so that the water can go underneath the whale and the whale will not get so dry, because the whale needs to be wet or it will hurt him if he gets dry from the sun.
Mommy, I think that's what's that called?
It's just a fireman car.
I think it's a fire truck car.
Yeah, we can call it a fire truck car.
And a fire truck police car.
Yeah,
They're scared. And what's that? Just called a digger. What's that? That's called a fire truck. Fire trucks help put out fires.
that's right. Squirting and
Ah,
spraying
they're a red
to
cars.
keep the whale cool.
Ah, they're a red cars, Mommy.
Mhm. And this is the tide coming into the bay. And these are the villagers shouting hooray as the whale and the snail travel safely away.
Oh, I'm falling.
Back to the dog and the flock on the rock, who said, how time's flown, and haven't you grown? And the whale and the snail told a wonderful tale of shimmering eyes and coral caves and shooting stars and enormous waves, and of how the snail so small and frail, with her looping, curling, silvery trail, saved the life of the humpback whale. Then the humpback whale held out his tail. On and on crawled snail after snail after snail. And they sang to the sea as they all set sail on the tail of the great blue humpback whale. The end. Right, good night, Luke.
Good night, Mommy.
I love you.
Look,
What?
I'm not moving. Look, I saw you. That
You
bone
saw
you.
me.
The bone.
I
Good.
saw you.
Hur gick jag ner? I'm in there. What are we? I don't know, I'm Molly. Yeah, that's all.
No, it's time to sleep. Put this in the sand, please. It's gonna stay here.
And I love.
Do we need to read another story?
Sweet.
Ah. Right, this one. You can have this one. Hold it. What shall we read now? The tale of the giant in town or Telephone Head?
Giant town. That's it.
The smartest giant in town. No more playing, please. It's time to sleep. Right. And remember, if you need a wee-wee, you need to go to the toilet, okay? So you're not wearing a nappy anymore. Right. Ready? Are you ready? Luke, you ready?
Yeah.
George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same pair of old brown sandals, hands, and the same old patched up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said sadly.
The small giants.
But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of smart clothes.
He's really inside the shop.
Yes, and so he bought a smart shirt. What else did he buy?
Glasses.
A smart pair of trousers,
And
a smart belt,
it's just a seat belt.
a smart stripy tie, and
That's a smart sock.
yes, with diamonds up the
It's
sides,
very big.
and a pair of smart shiny shoes.
Not that big.
They are because he's a giant.
So it's that all big.
It needs to be big because he's a giant, Luke.
He has to get.
Now, I'm the smartest giant in town, he said proudly. George left his old shoes and clothes behind in the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the pavement stood a giraffe who was sniffing sadly. What's the matter? Asked George. It's my neck, said the giraffe. It's so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a long warm scarf.
Bought a scarf for him.
Cheer up, said
Mommy?
George. And he
Mommy,
took off.
Mommy,
Yes?
he bought him a scarf.
No, he didn't. He gave him his stripy necktie.
That's for me.
That's very kind of him, isn't it?
It's a CA.
No, he shared his clothes because the giraffe needs it. It didn't match my socks anyway, he said, as he wound it round and round the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. Thank you, said the giraffe. As George strode towards home, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sail," said the goat.
And my hat.
"Mm-hmm.
And his new hat.
I blew it away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat."
And his hat too.
"But George don't have a hat."
And he.
"I know, but he lost. The important thing is a sail, because without a sail, he wouldn't be able to move." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his new white shirt.
Tie up
"It kept
there.
coming and tugged anyway," he said, and he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. "Thank you," said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. But look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's our house," squeaked the mother mouse. "It burned down and now we have nowhere to live. I wish we had a new house." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. "It was giving me blisters anyway," he said. As the mouse and her babies rumbled inside, the shoe made a perfect home for them. "Thank you," they squeaked. George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind. As he hopped, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a tiny little white mouse. But look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a campsite. Beside the tent stood a fox, who was crying. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sleeping bag," said the fox. "I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his socks with diamonds up the sides. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said, as the fox snuggled into it. It made a very fine sleeping bag. "Thank you," said the fox. George hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. But look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a big squelchy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog, who was howling. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's this bog," said the dog. "I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry path." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his smart new belt. "It was squashing my tummy anyway," he said, as he laid it down over the bog. "It made an excellent path. Thank you, said the dog. And the wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He helped on, singing to himself. My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. My belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. But my trousers are falling down. I'm the coldest giant in town. Suddenly George felt sad and shivery, and not at all smart. He stood on one foot and thought, I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes, he decided. He turned round and hopped all the way back to the shop. But when he got there, it was closed. Oh no, cried George. He sank down into the doorstep, and a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his way home. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. George took a closer look. My gown, he yelled. My dear old gown and sandals. George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. I'm the coziest giant in town, he cried, and he danced back home along the road. Outside his front door stood all the animals he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. Come on, George, they said. Open it. George untied the ribbon. Inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. Look inside the card, George, said the animals. George put the crown on his head and said, Your tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. Your shirt's on a boat and a sail for a goat. Your shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. Your belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. So here is a very fine crown to go with your sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town. The end. Hagbok na silok.